I don't want to record.
So maybe it's not the. Um. Actual, I was going to announce, but the Zoom announced for me that we are recording this meeting, as we'd like for the content to be available to those who couldn't attend, so, we are gonna record it. I'll go ahead and start, with an introduction of myself. My name is Veronica Cummings, and I work for, both for the project team as a facilitator for, the community advisory committee that we will be forming. And I will be facilitating part of tonight's meeting, starting with introductions that we'd like to know who's in the room. So I'm gonna go ahead and have city staff start with the introductions. And then we do have one of our team members who is on Zoom that I'll have introduce herself. And then we'd like to know who you are as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with city staff. Whichever order.
Sure, yeah. My name's Tony Rossi. I work with the Department of Economic and Community Development. In fact, all of us do. I'm gonna let everyone introduce themselves. But our job is really to try and guide both development physically and economically throughout the city. And then we do a ton of work related to housing policy. You want to?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Land, and I am a management analyst at the Housing Division in the Economic Community Development Department, and I'll be managing the Anti-Displacement Community Advisory Committee. So any questions, definitely ask me as well.
Okay, Michael Gus, Economic Development Specialist for the city.
Mel Freelander, the Director of Economic and Community Development. And so Tony and I sort of are overseeing this show, and Katie's managing the day-to-day and working directly with our consultant team. And Michael and Ernesto are here on the economic development part.
Yeah, Ernesto Lucero, I'm the economic development manager. For this project, I'll be kind of assisting on the commercial side and kind of matching up any small businesses to the community.
Christina, in work across the street, that kind of stuff.
Right, wonderful. And before we have our community members introduce yourself, let's go ahead and have our.
We introduced Arlene.
Oh, okay. Yes, please, Arlene. Hi.
Yeah, I'm Arlene. I'm employment specialist at Job Training, and I'm here to help for in translating for Filipinos in Tagalog. So if you need translation, then please let me know.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Arlene. Additionally, if we have any need for Spanish translation, we have Ernesto. And if we have any need for Mandarin translation interpretation, we have Katie. So thank you, Arlene. All right, I'm gonna have Ada introduce herself.
Thanks, Veronica. Hi, everybody. My name is Ada Penn, and I'm the director of HRNA Advisors, and we're the consultant leading this anti-displacement effort. And we'll be working on both residential and commercial work stream. And personally, I work a lot on the residential part, really leveraging our experiences with housing policies, and look forward to working with the team there. And definitely would love to see everyone in person at the next meeting.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ada.
And then I'll just introduce myself. I'm Joey Goldman with Kearns and West. My background's in planning and public engagement, and I'll be working closely with Veronica and facilitating the community advisory committee. So thanks for coming to learn a little bit more about this opportunity tonight.
Okay. Thank you, Joey. Now we'd love to know who is here from the community. What's your connection to South San Francisco? So I'm gonna have, if you don't mind starting, just go ahead and say what your name is and what your connection is. Are you a resident? Are you business? Both?
Both. I'm Joe Napoliello. I'm a resident here, live within walking distance, and also have a commercial real estate business, appraisal business that I work out of South San Francisco also.
Wonderful. Welcome, Joe.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Siegel. Full disclosure, I am a new transplant to South San Francisco, just moved here in March. I'm renting a home at Commercial and Chestnut. Our landlord, his grandparents, he grew up there and his grandparents have owned that home. So he's really interested in preserving that and passing it on to his kids when the time comes. Prior to moving here, I was the actual affordable housing preservation officer for the city and county of Denver. So I worked on lots of anti-displacement and housing preservation strategies. So when I saw this, it's a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. So very interested to see what the community is interested in here.
Wonderful. Thank you. Welcome, Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. My name is Greg Turner. I'm a fairly new resident, so it's super nice to meet you all. My wife and I purchased a property here on 200 Linden. I think it's 2021, so it's a couple of years now, and super happy to be here in South San Francisco. We moved from San Francisco itself, purchased a home. We wanted to be close to the airport, close to businesses, as well as next to the water here. So absolutely love it. Very glad, by the way, to see all the bike lanes coming in. Very happy about that. So yeah, just glad to be here. I also am the HOA president at our building as well. So I'm very passionate about the community, not only the building that we live in, but what South City has to offer. So very excited.
Oh, thank you, Greg.
I can vouch for great. Once can create program version over here and also help to develop the 200 Linden project and also future project in South City. And whatever we can put back in. Very interesting. Any type of company.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ken.
Hi, everybody. I'm Susie Sands, and I'm also a resident of 200 Linden Avenue. I've been living there for a couple of years, and I'm very happy to be part of this community.
Wonderful. Thank you, Susie.
I'm Annie Chang, also resident of 200 Linden. I've been resident of South San Francisco since 1982, and also I'm a business owner at 335.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. Welcome, Annie. Alright. Well, it's great to have everybody here. I'm sorry. Welcome. Go ahead and introduce yourself and say what your connection is to something.
Live in South San Francisco, Westminster Manor, lived here since 1987, maybe. I just got a message on my phone today about this meeting, and I don't know anything about it. I thought I wasn't doing anything right now, so I just come back.
Wonderful. What's your name?
David, 8 PhD.
David. Wonderful. Welcome.
Thank you.
Glad you're here. Okay, well, so tonight we are talking about the Community Advisory Committee that will be formed to help inform the development of an anti-displacement roadmap for both residential and commercial South San Franciscans. And so today's agenda, we already did the welcome introduction. We'll start by level setting and providing some background about how we came to be here today and how the Community Advisory Committee, or CAC, what led up to that. And then we're going to talk about the CAC. We'll give an overview of, what the composition will be, what its objectives or the outcomes that we're looking to come out of this group. We'll talk about some logistics impacts, such as like what the time commitment would be. And then we'll talk about the timeline of how the CAC will be working with the consultant team in order to eventually develop the roadmap that City Council will be passing at some point. Then we'd invite questions from all of you, if any arise towards the end, and then we'll adjourn at 6 o'clock. Again, want to be respectful to all of your time tonight. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Tony, who will give some background. Oh, well,
Look, there's pictures of us.
Yeah. Sure.
Some of us. Yeah, we've been having a conversation about the challenges, despite sort of this current sort of economic condition where we are seeing challenging interest rate and development and not a lot of new starts in housing. The last 10 years broadly have been a pretty big boom cycle for the city. And as we embarked on our general plan about 3 years ago, in trying to sort of understand what we've done right in the city and what we could change and what the future of South San Francisco looks like. We met with many commercial tenants that rent their building, many residents that own or rent their home. And one of the messages that sort of came up to the top as a community concern was seeing local businesses displaced or shuttered over the last decade. Friends and family that have moved away because of, the high cost of housing, whether you rent or purchase in the area. And that informed sort of a council directive to think about what we could do that would maybe eliminate some of this displacement we were seeing on Grand Avenue or Linden Avenue with small businesses, but also in our shopping districts throughout the city and on the residential side. And so we have a kind of a mandate now and a policy in place to try and set forth and have a conversation as a community. And this is the first part, really trying to have a small educated group of diverse opinions that can help kind of vet and share your life experiences and business experiences to kind of help inform what that strategy might look like. So that's sort of big picture where we've come from. This is a council has gotten to a contract with HRNA and their sub-consultant Kearns and West, and we're off and going this summer to try and figure this out over the next year or so.
Okay. Did we have somebody join on?
Yeah.
Zoom?
I just want to see, for the folks on Zoom, would you like to share just your name, why you're here today, and what your relationship with South San Francisco is like? Also, no pressure if.
Hi, this is Mary Prem. I'm with the South San Francisco Chamber of Commerce, and I'm joining in because I have a vested interest in the city.
Great, thank you for sharing.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mary, for being here. Okay, so thank you, Tony, for providing that background about how the CAC came to be in concept. And now we'd like to talk about what it will look like in reality. So I'm going to turn it over to Joey to go ahead and discuss the roles and responsibilities of the CAC.
Well, I'll sort of piggyback on what Tony was talking about a moment ago. We know when we're talking about displacement or concerns about displacement, that it can be really concerning for residents. It can be traumatic for families that are feeling pressure to move from their community, that it can change the look and feel of a business community. And so what we are doing here is bringing together a representative group of people who are going to be ground truthing the information that is being studied, that's going to be analyzed by the consultants, and to give us your feedback and your thoughts on, does I sometimes say, does it pass the smell test? Does this feel right? Does this feel like the experience that you have as a resident or as a business owner in South San Francisco? So part of the CAC's role is to bring together this mix of individuals with a variety of different experiences and different kinds of relationships to South San Francisco. The consulting firm HRNA that Ada represents is going to be bringing us sort of analyses as we meet over a period of a year approximately. And we would want to look closely at some of these things. One of these is looking at the types of anti-displacement measures that exist in other communities. It's really helpful to know, do a peer review in a sense of what have they done in Milwaukee? What have they done in San Francisco? What have they done in other places? And as a way to sort of spur some ideas or to generate some conversation about, how does that feel for us here in South San Francisco? We're also going to be asking you to provide some input on the recommendations. So it's not only looking at peer examples and looking at draft recommendations for a policy or set of policies that could be implemented in South San Francisco. But before that goes off to City Council, we want to make sure we've got a dedicated group of individuals who can, I said it a moment ago, does this really pass the smell test? Is this something that's going to work in South San Francisco? Is this something that reflects the interests of the community? Does this reflect my experience in South San Francisco? And part of that is getting feedback from your friends, your colleagues, your employees, your neighbors, and being able to bring that lived experience to these meetings. So you can say, well, this might not be the way I think about this, but I've talked to several people and they say that this is a real concern of theirs, or this is an issue that we need to talk about. So a lot of those kinds of issues will be the focus of our conversations. We will be discussing how specific policies might help mitigate displacement of residents and businesses. That will be one of the core things that we'll be bringing to the CAC. But a lot of that goes back to, as I said here a moment ago, to collaborate with the community to develop models and best practices that are going to work for South San Francisco. And then finally, I think this last bullet is really helpful too, because as a CAC member, you would represent you would represent this study and serve as a liaison back to the community about what's happening on this study. So while we ask you to bring information to the committee, to share experiences, we're hoping that you would also share out what's happening here, get feedback, work with other organizations within the city and share information to them so that they are all well informed about this process to make this as transparent as possible. Ultimately, the recommendations would go to City Council, and the approach here is that they will have been reviewed, discussed, and perhaps they will have your blessing, perhaps they will not, but that is information that will inform how decisions can be made by the elected officials in South San Francisco. On the next slide, we have a slide that shows what we are proposing for the composition of the Community Advisory Committee. And that includes some residential renters, residential landlords, local business owners, a real estate professional, representative of community-based organization, and a commercial landlord. And I think based on introduction, some of you may fit more than one of these categories. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for, again, a mix of experience in terms of the types of individuals who are on the committee, as well as geographic representation. And I think that's on the next slide. We are trying to make sure that we represent not just one, well, these are council districts here, but not just one part of the city, but that we have some geographic diversity on our committee and representation from the many corners and many neighborhoods of South San Francisco. And again, that goes back to being able to talk with community members and share what we're talking about on the CAC and making sure that we're getting the pulse of the whole city as we convene and talk about these anti-displacement strategies.
Great. And so Julie set the stage, the foundation of basically the components that are going into the development of the CAC. And once the committee is convened, then we do have a timeline of what the next few months or what that duration would look like for the committee working together. So I'm going to turn it over to Ada to discuss the timeline.
Thanks, Veronica. So I will talk a little bit about kind of the high level approach and timeline that we envision how this study process will move forward in the next year. And so currently we are already conducting some existing conditions analysis. And the main goal is to understand what has already happened, both on the residential and commercial fronts. And this involves looking at demographic changes, looking at housing indicators, how much rent have increased, is there differences across different submarkets in the city? How have the business profiles evolved and changed in the past decade? And the goal is to really identify more from a quantitative analysis, what are the potential vulnerable groups? It might be certain households with specific characteristics. It could be larger households. It could be households in certain neighborhoods or older homes. And as the CAC kick off around September, the CAC will also be a key part of that process, what Joey was saying, the smell test. Because we do love to hear on-the-ground information. Does our analysis really align with what you see through your daily life, through your work experience? And we will also have other public engagement throughout the process. I think this timeline show that we're gonna have 2 larger scale public open house, but we will also have one-on-one interviews, focus groups as needed. It could be with a smaller group of business owners or renting or owning properties in South San Francisco. And it could be apartment associations that have thoughts about different pain points. So there will be multiple touch points, but the idea is that as we progress on certain milestones, we will keep the CAC involved as a sounding board to gather feedback and also other insights. And once we identify the vulnerable groups, we will also be looking at existing policy and programs that are in place and review national and regional best practices. Displacement is an issue that a lot of communities are facing, especially communities with great real estate growth potentials. So there are some strategies that could appeal to similar vulnerable communities that have really seen great success stories. And we would also love to hear from the CAC, do you think those best practices are applicable in the South San Francisco context? So this kind of lays out the key milestones, and we are anticipating that it will likely take around a year. And we definitely look forward to working with the team here and also the to be selected CAC in the future along the process. And I'll pass it back to Veronica.
Great. Thank you, Ada. So the next slide that we have on anticipated outcomes, we did already touch upon it or cover it a bit. So I don't know if you want to elaborate more, Joey, or if we just want to go ahead and move to the next slide.
Right, I just sort of talked at it, so I don't know if there's much more that we need to say, but we'd be happy to answer your questions during the Q&A period.
All right, and so so now that you know all about what the CAC, what we're, the vision is, and how the work would contribute in a meaningful way to the roadmap development, it really is, consequential work that the CAC will be performing together. So again, we're just so thrilled that you're interested, and we certainly hope after tonight you'll share the word with people who you know. We're going to go ahead and talk about the application and selection processes.
That's my job, yeah. Yeah, I think I stand by the last slide because I talked ahead of it. But we do have some paper copies tonight. Our goal is for you not to fill out a paper copy, unless you need one, and we are happy to give you one.
I'm just gonna pass
we do
out
have the
so you guys can
applications
see.
online. We've received several applications already. We're looking for people who can fulfill all of these different roles that we talked about. And I think we've got the QR code link for the applications available that we can share with you in just a moment. The application due date is July 1st. We reserve the right to extend that a little bit if necessary, but don't hesitate to ask us any questions about the application in just a moment. We may also be conducting some interviews with you if you submit an application so that we can make sure we've got the right balance of participants, and just sort of assess how you might participate in an ongoing, community advisory committee. We will have a selection committee that will ultimately make some recommendations. And we would let you know if you apply to be a CAC member, whether, you are invited to join the CAC. We are assuming at this point that our kickoff meeting would be later this summer in August. We have not yet set a date for that, and we have not yet set a time for these CAC meetings. The expectation would be that they would take place on weeknights, about once a month. Over this approximate 1 year period, there might be a couple months that are skipped due to holidays or based on sort of the status of some of the milestones that Ada was talking about a moment ago. But we would work to find a date each month, a standing time that works for the members who are selected to participate. There will be, I believe, meals served to CAC members by participating. That's a token of appreciation and thank you for coming to join the conversation. And I think I will just say, I think the meetings will be based on other kinds of meetings like this, kind of fun, a way for you to get to know some of your neighbors and other businesses a little bit better, to really make some contributions to what's happening in the city of South San Francisco, and to make your mark on a really, really important set of decisions that will need to be made ultimately by the city council. I think from there we go on to Q&A.
We do.
Yeah.
Can I add something about the application?
Please.
For what it's worth, it can be filled out on your phone. You don't have to use a computer to do it. There are a couple questions where we want to hear about your experience. So as long as you're okay using your thumbs for 5 minutes, can totally work. It's easy to use and can be filled out in, you know, your native language. So we have the ability to translate. So don't let that, or if you know someone who might be interested, but they are monolingual and do not speak English, we would love them to also apply. We will have a path forward to make that work. So that's it.
Good point.
I want to add on that if you know community members who might be interested and could be great participants in CSE, that today's application materials and information through slides are all translated. So just come talk to me and I can make sure they get them. So if that's a language is a concern, we can make sure that everything is translated.
So I have a question. I'm curious because of the development that's taken place in South San Francisco over the last, I guess, 5 years, maybe even prior to that last decade, because I think it might be the last 10 years. What are some of the lessons learned that people that work for the South San Francisco, what have you learned from some of the experiences with development and displacement that you can share with us?
Who would like to answer that?
I can start by giving you some sort of things I've learned having worked here for the last 11 years and seen the first buildings downtown go up. Every side of the building matters. We are building in infill locations where you have a single family home and then you have, or a single story business, and then you have a 7-story new residential building. That's a big transition, and we have come up with ways to, I think, mitigate that a bit better than some of the earlier projects. Do not give away the street for construction staging for 18 months to 2 years. That displaces parking. Businesses rely on that for loading and unloading, for the optics of being accessible. We've done a couple of things that I think made it challenging for business operators downtown. And then we really need to be very proactive in messaging new construction. So we did start something on a construction coordination committee, and maybe some of you are on the email list where we have a bi-weekly email update that goes to anyone who's on our list that tells you where the streets are going to be closed, what kind of traffic's going on, why is PG&E up on Chestnut, because it feels like they're always up on Chestnut doing things. And so we are trying to be very forthright in communicating what's going on citywide. I think that helps a little bit, but you know, after 10 years, I think we are in a much better place in managing the way new development is approved and constructed. But there have been some learning lessons over the last several years.
I guess what I'd add to that is, I think early in the past economic cycle, when we were focusing on residential development and trying to get affordable housing into residential development and standalone 100% affordable housing built, try to ease some of that displacement pressure. We were really focused on that middle income category, and what we've really found is that doesn't work in South City. Our incomes are actually much lower here, and so I think now, sort of at the tail end of that cycle, when the city is spending money on creating affordable housing, and when we can sort of push to create more affordable housing, we're trying to make it more deeply affordable to really serve our local community better. And then that also reduces vacancy. We've definitely seen, and this is like inside baseball numbers, but like 80% area median income units or 100% area median income units being really hard to fill, because our folks in town need 50% or 60% of the area median income in that sort of pricing. So that's definitely like a policy change we've seen. Also, our city council took a pretty bold step and acquired 3 properties on this 200 block of Grand Avenue, in large part to preserve those commercial tenants, and being concerned about what a market rate transaction on that block would do to the 7 commercial tenants that have been there a long time and really make our downtown really vibrant. So that's sort of on the acquisition, when we have money involved, what we're doing.
I'm just curious too, were there a lot of residential families that were displaced during that time period?
Yeah,
That is data. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can add, I think Tony probably have more insights from what's happening in South San Francisco, but I would just add that based on our experience working with other communities, a lot of the Bay Area cities have just experienced exponential growth in the past decade. And when we look at how demographics change, we often seeing like a significant increase in households above, say, 150,000 annual income, and then a significant drop in extremely low income. And those are usually an indicator of displacement already happened, because if households are gradually moving on their career path, and you would see a more gradual increase in terms of number of households by the income bands. But with that said, I think a lot of times we also talk about displacement to have different definitions. Because when we see a new development happening, there might be direct displacement, meaning households have to move because new development is happening there. And what we more commonly referred to these days is more kind of the indirect displacement, because people cannot afford to pay the same rent as they were paying before. And sometimes it could also be kind of cultural, because the local business is changing. You don't have the brochure that you feel comfortable going to. So there are different types. And I think some of the lessons learned that we have experienced from other areas is that the mitigation measure is always the sooner the better. What Nell was saying, if the city has capacity, like land banking, there are some cities that are doing that. Is there kind of a local preference methods when you have affordable housing, and how do you kind of track the households who have already experienced displacement? How do you define that? So these are the more kind of detailed questions we will love to have the community's inputs. But yeah, hope that part is helpful. And I guess just briefly on the commercial front, in terms of business change, turnover, there's also more nuance, and some business by nature, the market might have outgrown them. their services might not be needed. So is it more about preserving the business or providing technical assistance for them to kind of get updated to the new e-commerce, or there's combination of different things. So the rent pressure might be only one part of the potential cost of displacement, and only by like really talking to you guys, we would understand more what's the real pain point. Is it related to real estate? Is it related to business capacity? Or is there other factors that are causing this involuntary displacement?
Thank you.
Thanks, Ada.
Did you have something? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was gonna ask a question, but also make a couple of comments. All of this really resonates with me, and Tony, I have to say, as a new resident in South San Francisco, I'm super happy with the communication that the city puts out. Having moved from San Francisco, which you would think had a lot of that together, I think South San Francisco does a much better job. Not only in the way it communicates, but the type of information that is communicated, and also the languages that it's communicated in. Which brings me to one thing that Mel had said. One of the reasons why my wife and I picked South San Francisco was the sheer amount of diversity within a few block radius. And of course, you have that in San Francisco and in the Bay Area in general, but I feel that it's really emphasized and really concentrated here in South San Francisco. So that just totally resonates with us. And one thing that Mel, you mentioned was, trying to address a lot of this with building more affordable housing. I am a huge fan, and I know dozens of residents whom I've talked to, neighbors that we just chat, who have also moved out of San Francisco. We say the same things, like, we are absolute NIMBYs, yes, in my backyard. Like, we want to see more, housing built, not only for people of all income bands, but particularly those individuals who really are the crux of our community, who come in and do the jobs that a lot of people have the luxury of saying, like, I'm not going to take that job because I can go somewhere else or do something. So to us, that's very important as a resident. That's the kind of community I want to live in, that celebrates that. Now, with that said, I do think South San Francisco is doing it very, very well. You see these beautiful buildings that are going up, that are elegantly designed. And I emphasize that word elegance because you don't need to build some ramshackle housing that just goes up and expect people to be happy in it. Like, there can be beautiful buildings that look very expensive, but actually support and provide a great place for people to live. Because let's face it, architecture, aside from sleeping, we spend what, 90% of our lives or more, 100% of our lives in the building that we live in or the building that we work in. So who wouldn't want to work and live in a nice, beautiful place? So I'm a huge proponent of that. So a lot of this really resonates with me. And again, this just confirms how happy I am to be here in South San Francisco and also in partnership with those businesses, because you can't just have super nice housing and people happy without having a beautiful downtown, without having really nice businesses. I'm very thrilled that Coach Anita has come in and anchored itself here. I think that's the start of a really incredible takeoff that we're only have been seeing these past few years and will continue to see, I hope. So.
Other questions? Yeah.
So
And it could be questions about this or about the process or anything. Yeah.
well, mine's more about the process.
Yeah, great.
So, how are the committee's going to be looking at stuff? They're going to be looking at options, possibly. Oh, well, they will be. How is it determined what the specific goal is? So we've been talking generality, and you want people to be able to afford the area. But then when you get down to the nitty-gritty, really specifics, who decides what the committee is really looking for or looking at, and what are they deciding or recommending to the city council?
Yeah, please. No. Yeah.
So Tony mentioned the preparation of our general plan and our housing element, which are really general type policy documents. This is meant to be more of an implementing policy type document. And so part of why we have a big consultant team, a large part of this is that level setting. And it's getting the fine grained data to decide how big is the problem? Who is the problem impacting? Like, we don't know the answers to those questions right now. And so Ada and her team are going through all of this background data, gathering new data to try to understand, this is the magnitude of displacement on the residential side, on the commercial side, and who in particular it's impacting. Bring that back to the CAC and to the larger consultant team and the city team and say, okay, what suite of policies is appropriate to address these problems? Or maybe there's not a problem in this area. We're doing great. Our local policies address this. And then to vet that with the CAC. This isn't a recommending body per se, because there isn't a formal requirement that the CAC unanimously or a majority blesses the final policy document before it goes to city council. It's meant to be participatory and collaborative and give input, and that input will be incorporated. But it is not like the planning commission, which has to vote and make a formal recommendation to our city council. So it really is about engagement and not necessarily a final yes or no vote.
And I will just add, I think when we convene, we will be looking at a specific set of questions each time. And asking, in much more detail, we may be focused on, as Ada was saying, specifically about commercial displacement concerns. And we could be looking, specifically at downtown, for a meeting, or we could be, talking about some things that have come up in this analysis that are really critical and that we need to discuss further to provide that input that would be helpful.
That was kind of along with my question about the two paths of commercial versus residential and how those will be presented. Do you just kind of anticipate maybe we'll spend, as the data comes in and you're ready, maybe there'll be several meetings spent on commercial and then residential? Just kind of curious procedurally.
Ada, maybe you want to talk a little bit to that, because I know that you've got at least a preliminary outline of what those meetings might look like.
Yeah, thanks, Joey. And yeah, so our current thought is to kind of have it intertwined, like we will have one session on commercial, one session on residential. But in terms of the CAC mix, I think as Joey talked about, like we do want to hear from both fronts, because a lot of times these two are intertwined. But in terms of the topic of discussions, this will also help our team to really do the analysis, hear the feedback, and make the efforts to incorporate those feedback as we move on to the next steps. But the idea is that, for example, we would have one session that talk about existing conditions on the resi end, and then a commercial session. And then we'll also, for example, have a session on existing housing programs and policies, and then another one on commercial, and the same thing for best practices. Or as we move forward further, as Joey talks about, we might identify specific submarket that needs more attention, or specific vulnerable households that require more discussion. So that's our current thought.
Is that helpful?
Yes.
Okay, good. And any other questions about the study or about how you apply?
One more,
Yeah.
the meetings, of the CAC, are they open to the public?
That's a good question. I don't remember.
Yeah, yes, they're public meetings. I think our plan is to have them noticed. They're not going to be on Zoom. We do want this to be like, you're in the room, you're actively participating. But it is, the city formed this committee, so the intention is that it's a public meeting.
And so the people that are not on the committee, are they able to, can they make comments?
No, we've not chatted about that.
Typically, they would be observers.
Yeah.
Unless we offer a
Like a public comment period.
period at the end of the meeting or something like
Yeah.
that.
We can
But
flex
it's a
that
great
out and make it
question,
work
because
there.
we haven't delved into that one yet.
But hopefully they'd also be in communication or have relationships with the CAC members. That way there's that, longer dialogue that they'd be able to carry forward into the meetings.
And it's not the, I do want to highlight, and Ada mentioned it in the timeline, it's not the only opportunity for public input, so there will be quite a bit of other outreach to the community at large.
And perhaps just based on that, it's worth noting, we hope you will all consider applying, if you are not selected, that you would still participate in this effort through other CAC members, through the public engagement process. This information will be presented to city council, and there will be opportunities to make comments on that as well. So, the goal is to make sure that we do have the community participating at large, but we are looking for a core group of people who will sort of be our sounding board as we move through this. Yeah. Anything else that we can answer for you now?
So the approval for the committee is it approved by the council or who make the determination who will be in?
Council delegated authority to select the committee to a group of staff members. 2 staff members from the city manager's office or 3 from the city manager's office, 1 from economic and community development. So I think it's a committee.
And then the
report.
consultant's assistants, yeah.
For those that would be selected, when would they know? Is it like a week or a month? Or
We would give you, I hope, ample notification. We had said that the selection process should be complete in early August with an initial meeting, probably in late August is what we're thinking. So I'm gonna just go out on a limb and say, you would know at least 3 weeks ahead of when we are gonna meet, so you could make a plan to do that. Well, thank you all very much for coming and your good questions. Thank goodness we're not outside for that one. There is a lot of food that the city has graciously brought, and we encourage you to help yourselves before you leave. Veronica?
Well, and if you think of any other questions or people who you speak with, might need to also speak with somebody. The designated point person is Tony. And so we have your email address from, to share on screen. And then Tony will be sure to get the questions to the appropriate person.
Yeah, and I want to flag, I see there are a couple other participants online. I don't know if we want to check and see if they want to do a quick intro as well.
Thank you for flagging that, Ada. Welcome to the participants who joined us on Zoom. I see we have Alvina, Francesca, and Kiana. Welcome. We don't know at what point you were able to join us, so we do invite any questions that you might have about anything that we've covered that you were here for.
And I'll note Alvina is with housing staff, so listening in with us, which is terrific.
Wonderful, welcome.
And Kiana says, I have no questions at the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
And do please take advantage of Tony's email address if you do have other questions, and
Sign me up.
help make sure that you get the answers that you need. Yeah, and with that, we will end this meeting. Thank you.
Yes, thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Never know if anyone's gonna show up, so this is great.
Also, applications are all online, so just go to the South. Oh, that's just for the city council districts, but let me see, there's a flyer around here.
You know what we can do is screen it up.
I
mean,
in fact, I didn't know where, I don't, well, I drive past it, but I didn't know where 366 is. So I went to City Hall and then somebody.
Oh, they helped you? Okay.
They actually opened the door for me. They opened the door and she, no, but she. I was surprised she opened it.
We do, we don't open the door after football. Yes, former US bank. This is Canada.
Right.
No, I just, thank you for the time.
Let you go and clear things out of line.